Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we got a special interview for you today, a special guest here at John Martin Talks, none other than Alfonso Rachel. So without further ado, from the West Coast where he's at to the East Coast where I'm at, here is my interview with Alfonso Rachel. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, as promised, we have a very special guest today on John Martin Talks, and that is none other than Alfonso Rachel. And, the first thing I want to talk, first, welcome to the show, Alfonso. We greatly appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
And I just wanted to start out the show by talking about your white privilege and how it's helped you. So, wait a minute. Hey, there's a black dude there, Billy Bob. That guy's black, man. No, I'm just kind of kidding, because the whole David Webb thing was such nonsense that so we'll start the kind of show talking a little bit about that, because I think that particular episode, that little incident, kind of sums up a lot about what's happening with the Democrats, the conservatives, and black, and the racial issues and everything. So what did you think when you first heard that clip? Because I'm sure you've heard it.
You know, that narrative is kind of spring loaded, and it's almost like ready to fire off on anybody. And before even starting the conversation, what do you think of your white privilege? Hey, wait, I'm not white. Even though a lot of the Afrocentrics and the liberals have disqualified my blackness, so I mean, I guess it's okay that it might apply. But if there really was a such thing as white privilege, I would definitely benefit from it, because my wife is white, and I want my money back, because look here, girl, I married you because I wanted some of that white privilege. She doesn't have any privilege.
Well, I didn't tell you this, but it's funny. Your wife is white, mine is black. So, hey,
did she want her money back? She was like, honey,
no, man. And this is probably, I don't know if this is risque to say, but there's an old saying. I don't know if it's out in California, but black don't crack, man. And she is one fine-looking lady. So I am truly blessed, brother, as I'm sure you are.
Indeed, it takes a while. So for some, it takes a little while. At some point, you end up looking like Morgan Freeman. But other than that, I think we kind of hang on to it a little bit.
But, I should have kind of said this at the top, in case people have not heard of you, which I can't imagine too many of my audience hadn't. But, man, you have literally done it all. I mean, you're involved in music. You've certainly got involved in movies, and we're going to talk about one of your movies here in just a moment. But you do videos, obviously got quite a YouTube following. I mean, really, my statement is this guy's kind of done it all. So tell us just a little bit about all of that, and then we'll get some more in specifics in just a moment.
Yeah, I reckon a jack of many artistic trades and an artist of none. I'm a master of none, as the saying goes. And I'm a musician. Primarily, I'm a musician. I'm the drummer and the founder of 20 Pound Sledge. That's my main music project. Because music is a powerful tool to move messaging, and the liberals have really capitalized on it. And it's a difficult thing for conservatives to do, because a lot of times when you want to work with musicians, they're often liberal. So that's how I got into doing my videos. I was like, well, I got this message, and I really want to support, my country, and do what I can to be conservative with the principles that this country was founded on, not take liberties with them and twist them into my own narrative, for my own selfish reasons. And so I started doing them as videos instead of doing them as music. That caught on. And I got, picked up by PJTV. And, long story short, that ended up in me doing movies when people like Nick Searcy, saw me doing the videos and also understood where I was coming from. And, I had talked about the Gosnell movie years before the movie had came out. And Nick remembered that, too, and said, you know what, I'll bet you could probably pull it off as an actor. I've watched you do your videos, and I think you could pull this role off. And he recruited me for that. And, long story short, that's how I got involved in, trying to use music, using videos, doing movies, just trying to stick up for God and country.
I hear you. So you can legitimately say this is not like the first time you've been proud of your country, like Michelle said famously. I mean, what a crazy statement. Well, you talked about Gosnell. I was going to kind of save that for later, but since you've actually mentioned it, let's talk a little bit about that, because this is the national what is it called here? Let me make sure. The annual March for Life is literally happening today in D.C. And so your movie Gosnell deals with, I think the title basically, or subtitle, like the most prolific serial killer in American history. And I have to say, I have not watched the movie. I plan to. I've kind of gotten out of the habit of going to movies basically, so I will watch it. But I did watch a lot of the coverage of it and a lot of the talk about it. And first, let me just say, give you a lot of props for having the courage to make a movie like that and be kind of in Hollywood, because I can only imagine that you've probably been called everything but a child of God for even participating in a movie like that from the left. Can you talk about that a minute, and then talk about the movie itself?
Oh, that came long before I even did the Gosnell movie. I've been getting the racial epithets and the hatred and the bigotry and the threats and all that sort of stuff long before I did Gosnell. And I think that's another reason why Nick was like, "Oh yeah, you're a vet already. You've already taken some arrows." For entertainers, that lean to the right, it's not an easy thing, because not only do you get ostracized in that matter, you can lose your livelihood. Chances are you may never work in this town again, for doing stuff like that. And I'm proof, as the entertainment industry goes, and even in social media and whatnot, where I've promoted a lot of my work, they hate my messaging so bad that they're practically made sure that people don't see it. So, the struggle is real, so to speak, if a person wants to stick up for their country, especially if they're in the entertainment business, there's a backlash for it, for real.
Yeah, and we see that across the boards. I mean, look at what just recently happened with the Academy Awards and all. You can't say anything. You got to be politically correct. And one thing my wife is always talking to me about, what she hates the most is the apology. She really hates when these people, you know what I mean? They get on there and they apologize for stuff all the time. Not that some things don't need an apology, but in general, that's one thing that the left is just dying for President Trump to do, to make some kind of a mass apology. Like, so, I mean, and he's not going to do it. We know that.
Right.
But I'm sure you've been basically asked to apologize for some of the things that you've been doing.
For the left, an apology, that ain't gonna do it. They want a blood sacrifice. They want their pound of flesh for what it is that they want, because these people are never satisfied. They're miserable, bigoted people. That's just what Democrats are. That's what the left wing is. They're just miserable, bigoted people. So no, Trump knows that an apology ain't gonna do no good. And these people, I think maybe like Chris Hart, who's supposed to be that host, maybe he's finding out the hard way, because he didn't say anything wrong. If he's taking a jab at homosexuality, I think that's the case. It's like, look, he's making an observation of something that's not natural, and he shouldn't have to apologize for that. And he's finding out, like, wow, what did I do that's so wrong? I thought we were supposed to be able to make fun of things, and that right there is something that's kind of, that's hanging low fruit right there to make fun of, right? No pun intended, to make fun of.
It used to be that comedy would be speaking truth to power, and basically everybody was open. And for me, I have this caveat, and you might get a kick out of it. I tell people, when it comes to all those issues, my policy's real simple, man. I got open mind, closed behind. I really don't care. I really don't care what alphabet you fall under. Hey, just keep it with yourself, and we're all cool, man. I mean, that's just kind of the way I look at it. But
there should be a way to do it. And it's not being hateful. Of course, to them, everything is hateful except for them. And but I think there's a way that we can disagree and even have a little, and even bring a little levity into it, without being hateful. But even with the left, I mean, most of their comedy is really hateful. They got the most hateful way of putting things and trying to accuse somebody else of being hateful. I don't.
Yeah, I actually saw an interview a while back with Jimmy Walker, comedian from Good Times, I guess, and he was talking about how much comedy has changed, and the fact that like every group now has their comedian. You have like the gay Korean women's comedy and all that kind of stuff, and it really has destroyed comedy. And I will say, I'm a big supporter of the MAGA agenda, but one thing I will say, and I'm not necessarily blaming President Trump, but President Trump has basically destroyed comedy, because these people, like on the late night shows and all, they're just not funny anymore. I mean, I don't know if they literally, and I don't mind attacking someone occasionally, but they have literally become Trump derangement syndrome comedy or something.
They definitely have that, man. It's like they got a skull full of expired, cream corn for a brain or something like that. It's gone really bad, and it's just coming out like vile. But this was happening before Trump, though, and the country.
Yeah, he's just exposed it, really.
Well, I mean, it's coming back around again. This isn't something that's new to the country. We've always had like vitriolic political discourse. The time of Abraham Lincoln is proof of that. They killed him. There was a war, and so political discourse. It has its peaks and valleys. We're revisiting again, and Trump, is of course, as we call it exposing, sure, but this is something that we've always known about these people. They've always been like this.
He's emboldened them to say things like the latest thing is with this whole nonsense with Pelosi saying, well, we should postpone this. I said on my show earlier, yesterday's show, I talked about, I really believe that one of the reasons why Pelosi doesn't want him to do the State of the Union address is, the obvious one about him giving the bully pulpit, but I think she's afraid of her new members just shouting out, impeach the motherfucker. I mean, I think she's worried about her own group, so to speak. I don't know if you thought about that, but I really believe she's worried about that.
I tell you the truth, I haven't really thought about it. I think probably if maybe she just doesn't want to have to call him Mr. President in front of a whole bunch of people. I mean, her ego is that big, and I just think that maybe he can order up another round of fast food and fill up a stadium, some hot dogs and corn dogs and whatnot, and give his State of the Union address there.
Yeah, that was one of the most, of all the ludicrous things that they've come out and criticized the president, this thing with the fast food, man. I mean, is there no end to the nonsense? It really shouldn't be a story. It's crazy. I mean, Obama did similar things, and
$65,000 for a hot dog.
Yeah, I mean, just because his his toilet seat didn't cost $500,000 or something, it's just crazy. But I want to circle back to that movie Gosnell, because I really, like I say, I could do like some people and lie like I've seen it. I haven't, but I'm definitely compelled to watch it. But because the one thing about here, man, I can see this with you, I'm just about giving, I call it the unvarnished truth. I this old desk here, scrub away all that old nastiness and just give the real truth out there, because that's what is needed, because the mainstream media really on both sides, I mean, Fox News even, it's getting harder and harder to get what I would call the unvarnished truth and let us make our own decisions. I don't know if you would agree with that, but
I do. Yeah.
And about this Gosnell movie, and I haven't really talked about abortion and that too much on my show, but, for me, and I don't think I've ever really admitted this, but I will say it now, I've kind of evolved on that issue myself. I mean, I kind of originally didn't pay much attention to it one way or another. And then I was kind of like, well, maybe it's not my business, maybe it's the woman's right. And now I guess I'm believing in science that, we're seeing more and more evidence that life literally is beginning at conception. But the thing that's really baffled me about the whole argument, one side or the other, is the passion that the left brings to actually literally taking a life. Because no matter what, you're ending a pregnancy, which is taking a life, and they're like adamantly, passionately for that. And I just don't really understand that aspect of it, that emotional tie to it.
Indeed, man. And that in itself speaks volumes. Is when you look at their attitude towards it and they demand it in us, you just see the selfishness pour out of them. It's evil. These people talk about coexist, but they don't want to coexist with a fetus inside them, and they're all about nature. It's like, well, let the kid run its natural term and come out. He'll come out naturally, eventually, if you just give him a chance. And but they don't follow through on their own narratives. And But for me, I'm like you, man. As I used to be kind of more or less agnostic about the whole thing, and I figured, hey, it's a woman's right, and what's the big deal, It's but all that's coming from selfishness, It's convenient and whatnot, and you can go ahead and you can fornicate with no consequences, and and what's the big deal? But when I started, when I was dating my wife, she just said something to me that made it very simple for me to see the big picture. Her basically all she said was, so, you don't see the child in the womb as human. And she said, that's how slavery was justified. Slavery was justified by disqualifying the black man's personhood,
Yeah.
or anybody's personhood. If you're going to make somebody your property, you have to not see them as human. And it was that simple. I was like, wow. That's exactly right. So from there, that's when I didn't try to argue with it. Just like you said, the unvarnished truth, it was right there. And I was like, I'm not going to play with that. This is life, and you don't mess with that.
Well, one of the analogies I like to give people is like the famous kind of scene. I think it was a couple cycles ago where I think they were having one of the debates, back when Obama was running. They had a Republican debate, and they said, how many of you believe in evolution? Raise your hand, And so they had everybody trying to put them in an awkward gotcha moment. You don't believe in science. And so I would turn that to progressives and Democrats and say, what if science actually, and I think they're closer to it than ever before, what if they actually prove that life literally begins at conception? I mean, I know a lot of people believe that, and I think the science, but if they could actually prove to you that it begins at conception, would you change your mind about it? And I think most of them would, because they're almost irrational in their pursuit of abortion. That's what really baffles me, is that they really demand it. I mean, if you can't even have a dialogue about it because there's nothing to discuss. To them, it's God Almighty,
right? Yeah,
in reverse, so to speak.
Yeah, that's their sacrament. And, and I hear some of them even try to say, you Christians defend abortion, and abortion's not even mentioned in your Bible. God doesn't even say anything about abortion in the Bible, which is untrue. But I was like, well, what if God in the Bible did give you that explicit language that you wanted? It's like, and it says, thou shalt not commit abortion. Are you going to obey that? No. It's like, so don't even try to make the argument that your Bible doesn't say anything about abortion, because you wouldn't obey that law anyway.
Well, it's as you mentioned that, to me, God has a different way of aborting. He aborts us after he gives us all a chance at life, and then Noah floods us or brings the walls of Jericho down, or the wrath of God at Sodom and Gomorrah. So, yes. He gives you a chance. See, that's one thing abortion doesn't give you, is a chance. So God gives you the fighting chance, and then, hey, if you're not doing right, then he makes it rain in his own way, so to speak. And it ain't Russian prostitutes, by the way. So. It's fire and brimstone, baby. So, my dad used to tell me all the time that if God didn't have a sense of humor, we'd be gone long time ago. So,
yes,
I don't mind. But this whole thing, you made the movie Gosnell. I'm sure it was difficult. I know you were primarily just acting. You didn't really have anything to do with the production of it, did you?
No, I just showed up to work.
Right. So apparently they had a tremendous difficulty in basically getting it to the point that it was seen widely, and it has been. And you could say that about a myriad of movies. There's, Dinesh D'Souza, some of his movies and those kind of things. If it's a conservative movie, then it's very difficult to get funding and get, big mega stars to star in it and all of that kind of stuff. So could you talk a little bit about that aspect of it and you getting involved in it? And because to me, it's got to have jeopardized to a certain extent your career if you wanted to be an A-lister, and I don't mean to put you down on that, but if you wanted to be if you want to be up for Academy Award, you're probably not going to be in Gosnell.
Yeah, and fortunately, I don't seek fulfillment in those things. So I just want to be able to illustrate. I want to do the message. I want to do the work. And but in this, the easiest part of the Gosnell movie was getting the money. That was the easiest part. You know, it showed proof of concept. You know, when they put it out there, it's like people were they were like, shut up and take my money. You know, it's like they wanted to fund it. Getting the platform to do it, that was a little difficult because, you know, I think what did they do it on Indiegogo? They tried to start off on a Kickstarter or something like that, and Kickstarter kicked them off. And I think they went through Indiegogo, and from there they were able to raise, you know, like 2 million plus. I think in like 45 days or something like that. They raised it quick. It was historical. And,
well, that was probably some of that meth money they were talking about, you know, that like to build the wall. The gentleman that funded GoFundMe, it's their meth money. Was it Jimmy Kimmel or somebody? Idiot said that it was people having to spend their meth money. So maybe it was a bunch of meth heads that you know, are pro-lifers that put the money in there. I kid, but I kid a lot. What can I say?
Well, if that's the case, I'm sorry, Jimmy Kimmel. Then we got some of your money. Projecting meth head. But yeah, to do that. And when we got the money, or when they got the money, I should say, you know, I think, you know, they were able to find the cast that they needed to do it. And from there, it was getting the distribution that was difficult. You know, people didn't want to distribute the film. Finally, they got the distribution, but then there was also a judge tried to hold up the movie, tried to sue. You know, I guess they didn't like the way that they were being represented. It's like, look, man, we didn't take any liberties on how people are represented in the film. You know, it is what it is. And, you know, those are the obstacles that we had to go over. And it took a while. You know, I think we finished shooting in, what, 2015, I think, finished shooting. The movie didn't come out until 2018. You know, so, yeah, there was some hold up there.
Well, I could only imagine you've probably gotten a lot of kudos from people and heartfelt thanks for making that movie, because I've heard people's response to it, and the emotional response in a positive way is just overwhelming. I'm sure you've experienced some of that yourself.
You know, probably less than one would assume. Those who have seen it have expressed their thanks, but most of my audience really doesn't even know that I'm in it. They didn't know that I was in it. They went to the movie and say, dude, I didn't know that you were in this movie. And but because social media is blocking me out so much, even those who would try to mention that I'm in the movie, I don't even get that message.
Well, really, if you look at that, that's actually a testament to your skills, because the last thing you want to do is watch a movie and the whole time you're watching it thinking of the person that's in the movie as rather than the character. You know, because every time you see like William Shatner, that's Captain Kirk. It doesn't matter what he does. So, you know, the fact that people didn't recognize you, actually, I would take that as a compliment to your acting skills.
Wow, that's great. I mean, you know, even though my name pops up, but you know, it's I'll take that as a compliment.
Well, one of the things, I mean, I've watched you on your YouTube videos, and they're excellent, by the way. I hope to take a few lessons from you down the line. But I know that censorship of conservatives, it's been in the news a lot lately from YouTube and Google, which is, I always say, Google is of the devil. I'm just warning people. And Facebook is Mark Zuckerberg and God we trust. I call these all the, you know, the masters of the universe. But, you know, the famous cases of it, obviously, Alex Jones just recently got banned again from Roku. I don't know if you even saw that, like yesterday or the day before. He had a Roku, however you say it, a country boy accent. I can't, you know. But I'm the old salty dog from fishing, and as Don Lemon probably referred to me, the most dangerous man in America, some old white dude, you know. But we'll talk more about that in a second. But anyway, getting back to the censorship, it's had some impact on you, hasn't it? Could you talk about that? Has it impacted you? I'd heard that it had.
Oh yeah, man. It's actually it's rather punishing. Really, it's basically destroyed my livelihood, because that was my livelihood, was you know, creating content, putting it out there. I have a following of over 100,000 on Facebook. You know, that's pretty good. That's a fair amount of folks to be able to share content with who want to give you support and stuff like that. I can barely reach a few of them, and Facebook has not allowed it to grow. You know, it's stayed at about 108,000 for like a couple of years. It won't grow. Twitter's the same way. I got about 33,000 followers on Facebook. It hasn't grown past that in about 3 years. YouTube, 70,000 subscribers, hasn't grown past that in about 3 years. So what they do is that they keep my content from going out, even if people want notifications from it. What they do is that they keep you out of sight, and that keeps you out of people's minds, out of sight, out of mind. And so yeah, it has a devastating effect, and people just basically you go off their radar, and people, and from there, even a lot of conservatives and media will treat you like a leper.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I talk about on my show that old dude Algorithm, man. He, oh Al, he is one tough cookie, man.
Yeah.
But what gets me is here you have been censored, and I believe it or not, even our show is still kind of in its infancy, and we've already experienced that because I had some memes, for instance, that I put out that had like over 1 million views, and then the next thing you know, once I hit that level, now I'm back down to 6,000.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So, and what really gets me is you look at somebody like Kathy Griffin, and she's on Twitter, and she's literally on Twitter over Christmas time selling "FU Trump" Christmas bulbs. I don't know if you saw that, but she's selling, Christmas tree ornaments on Twitter that literally say "F you, President Trump" to hang off your Christmas tree. And yet her following is growing. Her business is growing. She even admitted that quite a bit of her livelihood is selling "F you" memorabilia about Donald Trump. But she's not censored, any of that kind of stuff. But yet I've watched your videos. I don't see anything on there that, if you don't like making fun of different things, maybe so, but there's nothing on there that would incite violence, would really be looked at as putting anyone, creating a situation where they might come into harm's way and all of that. It's just they simply don't agree with it. Or what's even more important is you're not following the narrative.
That's a big no-no.
That's it. You got to follow the narrative. You just look like at the whole immigration issue right now and build a wall, whereas like the Democrats were like literally saying it's a crisis at the border. And I don't know if you saw Sean. Was it Sean? No, it was Marco Rubio, which I'm not necessarily a big fan of Marco's, but I was at a recent event here, and he spoke at it, and he said that he had posted like 3 different sayings where people had said it was a crisis on Twitter, and then they came back and hammered him for it. But then he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I should have put who actually said it." And then he played it, and it was Obama and Clinton and all of that actually said all of this stuff. And so, it kind of goes back to something I'm always saying. There isn't a double standard, really. There's only one standard, and that's a standard for conservatives. There's no standard for the left. They could say and do whatever they want to, but what have you tried to do to solve this problem for you? Is there things you're trying to do? What's out there to try to, or what can we do to get around some of this stuff, to beat old Al, by the way?
Sure. And really quick, with the liberals, as the saying goes, if it wasn't for double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all. and for me to do with going up against the liberal overlords, so to speak, they basically, they are what they hate. They hate monopolies. And that's what they become. Google, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Like one of the things that makes it very difficult for folks to find me on any other social media platforms is that even Google has made it difficult to find me. Unless you know my name, you can find me. But other than that, you won't like accidentally stumble across my name. Like say, for instance, if you type in like different people who are doing social political commentary, these pundits and stuff like that, or any of our contemporaries, you type them in, they have cross references for a lot of them, right? So, but my name never comes up in the cross references. People whose shows I've been on, people I've been affiliated with, coworkers and whatnot, you could type in their name and these different cross references will come up, but my name never comes up. So Google has made it to where you can't even really discover me. So, what does one do about that? The only thing I can do is just keep trying to create content, but almost in vain. Because, I can, like people say, "Hey man, I haven't seen a video from you in like 6 months." It's like, I put up videos like twice a week, but they don't know until it's gotten to a point where I can't really put up any videos because that takes time and money. That just to do like 2 videos a week, that's like a 40-hour-a-week job. I can't afford to do that. I have to work a conventional job. But I can't really spend the time making videos the way that I used to because I don't have the support for it anymore.
Well, it's interesting you would mention that because when I was trying to do a little bit of background for the show, I was surprised because I've seen your numbers and how wide a following you have, it was a bit of a challenge, and you've explained it eloquently as why, to get some more in-depth background about you. And I think it was because of exactly what you're saying. Maybe you need to become a Nazi or something, because like I don't know if you remember this, but talking about Google, this is why I say they're of the devil, is because they had a thing and they said it was a mistake where a year or so ago, if you did a Google search on Republican Party of California, you got the real Nazis. I'm not talking about the wannabes here and this, but you literally got pictures of Adolf Hitler and everything. And they said, "Oh, that was just a mistake." Yeah, right.
No, and they do stuff like that. Like, what is it? Wikipedia? Wikipedia puts the definition of fascist. Fascist is a right-wing idea. It's like, no, it's not. Fascist not, but that's how they market it. And millions of people look at this stuff and they're like, okay, to be right-wing is to be fascist. And that's actually the total opposite of us.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned that, and because that actually brings me into another topic, because there's, Dinesh D'Souza does some excellent job on this, that explaining the big lie, I think, as he calls it, the Democrats. And you wrote an article I was reading. It was last year, but I think it's still a couple years ago, actually, but it's very pertinent to today. And the title of it was Explaining Black Loyalty to the Democratic Party, because there's this big lie out there that the Democratic Party is the party of freedom for, in this case, African Americans. Hey, really going back to Indians and everything else. The Trail of Tears was all Democrats and everything else. But could you talk about that a little bit, about your perceptions of why the African American community in general has been so supportive of the Democratic Party when it's really a big lie?
Well, the Bible itself gives us, it kind of gives us an outline of that. But really what it comes down to is when you're able to have a group that is able to patronize you, and not only patronize you, but take your focus off of the evil that they did by basically accusing somebody else, that works like magic, man. It's like one of the easiest things to do. And that's what Democrats have effectively done. Democrats from the beginning have tried to control somebody else's life. They're the ones taking liberties with somebody else's rights. And then when you have people worked up in anger, it's easy they're blind at this point. They're blind. And so it's easy for Democrats to say, oh, no, that wasn't us. That was Republicans. They were doing it the whole time. So the big lie is always going on. It's just like LBJ said, and he knew that this lie would work. It's like, I'll have those N-words voting for Democrats for the next 200 years. Why? Because we're very good at making what we do mask and put it on somebody else. We'll put it on Republicans and it's going to work.
Yeah, it's almost like that crazy movie that's out, Bird Box, where you're walking around with a blindfold on, which YouTube has now come out and said that they got I talked about it on my show yesterday, that YouTube's now come out with a warning about that they're not going to allow people to show videos of people blindfolded. So they're protecting people from that type of idiocy, but you trying to speak the truth, they want to censor. Well, President, let me ask you this about President Obama first. And I'm not trying to fall into the trap where you got to explain all, you're like the spokesman for Black Power. I'm not trying to put you at like, Al Sharpton or whatever and all that. But I do think you have a unique perspective on some things. Obama, let me just talk about myself for just a second. I really felt like, I'm from the South. Big surprise, right, with this accent. This is an old Florida cracker accent, by the way. And I grew up in a little town called Hawthorne, Florida, and we're basically 50-50 black-white. We always have been. And I really felt like that race relations were getting better and better. And I've always said you cannot legislate what's in a man's heart. So, there's always going to be a certain level of racism and that kind of thing. It doesn't really matter what you do. But by and large, I felt like people were at least trying to get to another level. Yeah. Since Obama, and I kind of fell into the trap, if you will, about, that, hey, we got the first black president, maybe things are really going to take off now. But it seems to me that it's gotten worse. And let me just give you this quick scenario, and then I'll turn it back. I don't mean to monopolize your time. But I've always been, I mean, like I say, my wife's black. I grew up in my father was a very prominent political figure, so I'm campaigned with him in black churches in the South. So, and the town I lived in, and this probably sounds corny, but black folks don't scare me. You know what I mean? They never have. I mean, I just don't scare me, right? But I sense now that when I go around some people, like say at a convenience store, that don't know me personally, maybe it's just me, but I feel a sense of caution with black people and white people that I didn't feel a decade ago. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but if it does, could you comment on that?
Well, it's understandable. Jesse Jackson says the same thing. Even Jesse Jackson says, when I'm walking down the street and I feel some footsteps behind me, and I turn around and I look and I see it's a white person, I'm relieved. So it's like, the way things are now, and this started actually happening a little bit before Obama. This race relationships were starting, relations were going sour, because you had the left wing media that was pulling out underhanded stuff when Bush was running, and they would put up articles say that if you vote Republican, a black church is going to burn, and they put up footage of you got the police officer back from the 60s, hosing, releasing the hoses on black folks and releasing dogs on them and stuff like that, and say this is what you get when you vote Republican. So the race tensions were starting to amp up even during Bush's term, and that's when I was trying to say that, okay, listen, those churches that they were talking about that were being bombed, that was Democrats doing that. That footage that you see of people getting hosed, that was Bull Connor orchestrating in a Democrat state under Democrat mayorship, and you got Bull Connor out there who's a Democrat and a member of the KKK. So all these things that you guys are trying to put on Republicans, that was Democrats doing that. But this stuff started to ramp up during Bush's term. And by the time Obama stepped into office, that's when it just exploded, because it was primed for the fact that we're going to run Obama. And if anybody tries to object against the socialist narrative that we're trying to push through him, all we got to do is say that they're racist. And it worked like a charm.
Yeah, just pull the card on people. Yeah, I can see that. It would, because I think that kind of leads me into President Trump. He famously, of course, he's ridiculed for saying it in certain segments where he basically went to Detroit and told black people, he said, what do you got to lose? I mean, he didn't give them a long speech. He didn't give them this long list of promises and everything else. He just said, what do you got to lose? And I think that resonated with more black people than the media wants to give credit to, because one of the things you hear, and I hate to use the term black friends, but I've got like a lot of black friends, on guys I went to high school with and stuff. And on Facebook, we'll get in some debates and stuff like that. And they always come back, well, what has the Republican Party done for me? And all that. And I'm like, but you don't understand. That whole mentality has got to be destroyed, because JFK said, not ask what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So if you're judging a political figure simply based on what they've done for you, I could make a case that that's not part of the American dream to start with.
Well, it's like, and I hear that question a lot, in the black community. What has Republican parties done for black folks? Well, how about in slavery? We can start there.
There's a couple there. A couple little minor points, right?
And how about abolishing institutionalized bigotry? Abolishing lynching laws. Removing lynching, stopping anti-miscegenation. How about stopping, ending Jim Crow? We got the voter rights, we got the civil rights. We can attribute those things to Republicans. What more do you want? But the thing that's funny is that, I do hear, a lot in the black community asking, what have Republicans done for us? Like, what do you need us to do anything for you for? I thought Democrats had all that handled. I thought Democrats made sure that your life is lovely. If Democrats are so great and you're so loyal to them, you shouldn't even worry about what Republicans need to do. You shouldn't need for anything. It should all be taken care of.
Well, one of the things I say on my show all the time is that, like President Trump, he is the worst racist in the history of this nation. And I say that because if he's truly a racist, he sucks at it.
Yeah.
He's terrible at it. You know, in other words, I mean, black unemployment at all-time high, black home ownership all-time high, black business ownership at 400% increase since he's been in there. So if he's a racist, he sucks at it. He's the worst ever because he's terrible at it.
Indeed, indeed. And all this comes down to, and see right there, that's proof of a culture that doesn't want racial tension to end. These are people who they got like a fetish for it. Really, is they don't want it to stop. They want to be angry. They want to vent, and it's like an addiction for people. You know, for those who are in office, they don't want the racial tension to end because it equals votes for them when they can patronize people for it. In terms of money, the movie industry and the TV industry, they don't want it to end because that's ratings for them. They want to keep the racial. They need that boogeyman factor. And racism is the boogeyman. They don't want it to stop. And then, of course, like I said, just on the ground level, you got people who just want to be angry about it. They want it. It's delicious to them.
Yeah, well, one of the things I say, and you just touched on it, the boogeyman, is the way the Democratic Party operates is they divide groups into segments that might not normally, like, for instance, talk about African Americans and abortion and all that. It's actually African Americans in general aren't supportive of abortion, you know, and that kind of thing, even though with Planned Parenthood, they force a lot of them on it, but that's a whole nother story. But you talk about like gay rights and that kind of thing and the old traditional church. I mean, there was a lot of animosity or so between it, but the Democrats have done an excellent job from just a political perspective of dividing groups into this, and then they make them pissed off. They hate something, and then they present the common boogeyman, and one of the best ones they've ever had now is President Trump. Here's the boogeyman, and that unifies them all back together. I mean, that really is their strategy. It's not a solution. Mm-hmm. It's not solutions, which what you were kind of talking about, how what has the Democratic Party really done? It's not about solutions. It's about divide and conquer. That's really what it's about. It's the art of war. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you know, the greatest weapon that the Democrats have in that is the black community. All the strife and the struggles that the black community is basically dealing with is the policies of the Democrat Party, the apartheid policies that Democrats have imposed on the black community that America is in general is still pretty bitter and scarred over. And these things that Democrats have done, they can use those things to gain sympathy votes for their cause. And they want to increase their voter stock. And for blacks, you know, just like you said, generally the black community is at odds with the homosexual agenda. However, more and more, you know, the black community is taken to the idea that, well, there was a time when, you know, you didn't have certain rights. So because you didn't have certain rights, don't you think it's fair that homosexuals should have these rights too? And then they get sympathy votes from other people, you know, with the whole white guilt and the white privilege thing to say that, yeah. And so with the black community is being used. The black community is being used and the black community is being emasculated. You know, black men, like say, for instance, I you know, here in Southern California, you go into West Hollywood, which is you know, predominantly gay, has a high gay population. And when you look at their billboards usually often feature black men, right? Make sure you get tested for HIV, right? And when you see these posters, it's usually a black man, right? So they're using the black men to promote sympathy for the LGBT agenda. And it's like with the black community, it's like, why do you allow Democrats to do this to you? You know, it's like you think the Democrats are your friend. They're not. And but, you know, that's one of the things that I've been trying to promote. And I guess I might have been doing a good job because they don't want me saying anything.
Well, there's that one big donor. I can't think of his name. He's been loving black men to death here lately out there in California.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I mean, let's don't even go there. But let me ask you quickly about like something that, you know, President Trump, the gains that we just mentioned, and I've been reading some poll numbers that seem to be pretty favorable, that there may be, in fact, be a change happening within the black community. And I'm a little bit, because of, you know, my past experience, I'm a little bit leery of those numbers and polls in general, of course. But do you think that there is some awakening in the black community to what President Trump in this case is actually doing to help all Americans, you know? And if it's so, is that something that can last And what does maybe President Trump and the Republican Party need to do, and conservatives in general, to build upon that? What can they do?
Oh man, I'm going to sound like the cynic here, but unfortunately, no, it won't last. And the reason why I'm saying this is because it's happened before. Remember, blacks were freed by Republicans, and despite the legislation that Republicans brought into Jim Crow and all that sort of stuff, it didn't last long. Okay, hey, great, Republicans, thank you. We're going to go vote for Democrats now. So this is going to happen again, especially if it's done under a political figure. See, that's one of the things that I may not be popular with a lot of folks in this age of Trump, is because, I voted for Trump and I'll vote for him again. I think he's doing a great job, but because I wasn't out there MAGA and promote Trump, people got a little sensitive about that. It's like, no, I'm not here to promote a politician. I'm here to promote conservatism. That's the thing I'm trying to make stick. That way, that has more staying power. It has more stability than trying to get behind a political figure. We develop a cult of personality here. That's unstable. So with the black community, we got the walk away campaign, and I'm like, okay, that's great. You're walking away, but what are you walking away from? Do you really know what it is that you're walking towards? That's the thing we need to get to. You're walking away because you're angry. You feel like you've been cheated. You feel like you've been lied to. And that's I understand that. But because you're angry and you're walking away, you don't know what you're walking towards. And if you may remember at the beginning of the segment, I said this starts, with the Bible. And asking me if this is going to last, if we look at the Bible, what the Bible says, the Israelites, they were sick of the oppression, right? They're crying out to God because Pharaoh's heart, and God did this on purpose, right? He purposely hardened Pharaoh's heart. Why would he do that? Hey, God, why would you make oppression so hard for the Israelites? Because God is like, look, these people don't really know what they want. I want these people to know that when they leave, they know exactly why they're leaving and understand what it is that they want. They just want the oppression to stop. They want the suffering to stop, but they don't want to stop being slaves. That's the difference. They want to be comfortable. They want to be comfortable in their slavery. Pharaoh he can have all the services that he wants as long as he gives us food and gives us comfort and all that sort of stuff. We don't mind being his slaves, right? So God's like, no. I don't condone slavery in any form, all right? You can be a servant of mine, but a slave to man? No, that doesn't work for me. So your oppression is going to get ramped up. And I want you guys to be sure of what it is that you're leaving. And how do I know this? Because as soon as they got freed from Pharaoh and they got a little taste of that gritty freedom, what did they say? We could have died as slaves in Egypt with bellies full of fish and be happy, right? God's like, yeah, that's exactly what I thought. It's not freedom that you really want. You don't want freedom. You just don't want to suffer. That's the difference. So when in answering the question of, is this going to last, where blacks are going to walk away and become conservatives? I don't know about that, because we've seen it before. They wanted to go back to the Democrat Party.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you, sadly so. But I think, and you're really saying it, is that the component, going back to the Bible story you were talking about, the component that's missing with freedom comes tremendous personal responsibility. I mean, there is a certain personal responsibility that a lot of people are scared of. And I've said all along that if you look, and this is not just for Black America, it's for impoverished America, if you will, the Democrats, their policies are basically trying to keep you comfortable in poverty. Yes. We have a local political figure here. She used to be a county commissioner. I'll give her a shout out. Her name is Susan Baird. And she used to say that instead of a safety net, what we now have is a hammock. And that people just get comfortable in that hammock and they're afraid to get out of it. And so we've got to have some reform somewhere down the line that actually lifts people from poverty, gives them a true step up so that they become personally responsible. Because I've said to people many, many times, because I used to work as a drug counselor at a treatment center, and I used to tell people, until you feel the weight of your own life, you're never going to be able to solve any of your problems. If someone is propping you up, in this case enabling you, you're never going to be able to make the changes you need. You need to feel the weight of your own life. And I think the Democrats, and when I say excellent, I don't mean that as a praise, but they've done an excellent job of making people where they don't really feel the weight of their own life, and they're in that hammock.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
And so, unless we can break that, I don't know. And maybe economics somehow can do it. But I want to touch, but you kind of mentioned a few things. There's another article that you had written, and it's why saying only whites can be racist and really stupid. And we talked about that kind of at the front with that David Webb and your black deal. But what really kind of got me going back a few months is when Kanye West, you know, you could be critical of Kanye, and some of the criticism is probably valid. I mean, he is all over the place sometimes. But when he did what he did in the Oval Office, what really hurt my soul as someone who actually, as I say, I gave you some of my background, is when Don Lemon had that panel of other black folks on there, and they basically I'm not even going to say it because, you know, how you get in trouble, but they essentially called Kanye a house whatever, you know, and that he was everything but a child of God. And I was saying, I can only imagine what they're saying off camera about this dude. So to me, and I stretch this on to another point, that there is an opportunity in like rap people like Kanye. And I know I don't mean to label him one way, but if you look, now all aspects of rap, some of it is you know, denigrating, but some of it is very capitalistic. And, you know, they want, a matter of fact, Trump was celebrated to a certain extent in that world when he was, you know, Citizen Trump and Trump Towers. But I do think that there is an opportunity to show people that may break this cycle that we've been talking about in the opportunity of capitalism, because the Democrats' message is so limiting, and the Republican message is, hey, you can do. Look what I'm doing. Look what you're doing. You can do whatever you want to do, whatever you want to be. You know, we're not selling the American dream, I guess. But going back to Kanye, I didn't mean to get off of that. It really hurt. I don't know how you felt about it, but it hurt me in my soul to see the way he was treated by, I have to say it, by African Americans. It really bothered me.
Yeah, indeed. You know, with Kanye, I didn't really tag on to Kanye the way, you know, many folks did, because I was like, you know what, he has a pattern of inconsistency. This could be a stunt. You know, in a way, it was a useful, you know, stunt even on his part. You know, it did bring some awareness, but at the same time, it's like what was behind it was still not sure. I mean, Kanye does things that are kind of erratic, and this, you know, for whatever reason that he was doing this, you know, once again, you know, I really couldn't, because ultimately he came out and said, hey, I feel like I'm being used. He turned on the very thing that he was promoting, you know? So it's like, he's too unstable, and it's not like he was vetted. And the thing that cracks me up is when you have, like, a lot of times conservatives are always saying, you know, who cares what these celebrities think? And this drives me nuts. You know, it's like, well, these celebrities are influencing a lot of people. You know, a lot of people care what they think. They have lots of fans. But conservatives are always saying, who cares what these people think? Who cares what they... Oh, look at Kanye. He's being a conservative. It's like, wait a minute. You didn't care what he said just a little while ago. Now, all of a sudden, you care what he thinks. And I'm like, be careful with that, because he's not really vetted, and you really don't know where he's coming from. And sure enough, he turned around and betrayed everything that the conservatives thought that he was promoting. So, you know, do I feel bad about how Kanye is treated, you know, by others? Like, well, welcome to the club, Kanye, because black folks, you know, tend to, you know, if you don't walk in line with the herd, they'll turn into sharks, and they'll smell blood in the water, and they'll turn on you. And that's not in black folks' DNA. You know, I'm not trying to say that, hey, that's just how black folks are. That's not in our wiring. But culturally, though, that's what it takes to qualify to be black, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's kind of a type of conditioning and all that.
Yeah.
It must be really frustrating to a guy like you to see all that about Kanye when you've been kind of true to the cause for so long and probably not gotten the recognition you certainly deserve in many elements of society. So, and it always gets me, I think about, I think it was Eddie Murphy, or it might have been Chris Rock, but one of them did a routine about how, like, a bunch of black dudes standing on the corner talking about slavery, and how they, hey, I wouldn't have done that. He would tell, I'm not picking that corn.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember one. I can't remember which one of them
Eddie
did
Murphy.
it. Yeah, it was really funny because we tend to forget. We think that we're somehow just born with all of whatever. We're products of our environment and our culture. That's why these culture wars, by the way, are so important. And that is why it's kind of a compliment that this censorship that they're doing of people like you, because they are afraid of you. They're not necessarily that afraid of Kanye West, but they are definitely afraid of the Alfonso Rachels of the world, because they absolutely, I mean, that's just my opinion. They don't want your message to get out there because it's a message of truth that might actually resonate, and therefore it's got to be stopped. Well, we only got about 4 or 5 more minutes. What do you think about this whole border deal, the immigration, so-called, as they call it, so-called manufactured crisis? I mean, I interviewed Sabina Durden. I don't know if you know, she's one of the angel moms last week. And I don't see how you can look in the face of one of these people and say that it's a manufactured crisis, but it's supposedly racist and all of that. You got any thoughts on any of that?
And once again, man, it's racist. And hey, who better to help push that narrative than the Black community, right? Just lean on them and say things like, we're going back to the days of Jim Crow, when Black people couldn't do this and Black people couldn't do it. We're doing the same thing to illegal, or actually not illegal in their eyes, but immigrants. That's what we're doing to them. So once again, use the Black community to gain sympathy votes for their cause. And but we don't want a good crisis to go to waste now, do we? I mean, they created the crisis. If they're going to try to accuse Trump of being a racist because he says that these people are animals, but they going to turn around and say that we need to shelter these people because they're running from violent crime. They're running from these people who are killing them and doing this and that. And it's like, okay, well, you guys got to make up your mind. Where these people who are trying to come here, why are they coming? Are they running from something? Or when they're trying to talk about refugees running from Islam and sort of, we need to show more mercy to people who are refugees from the Middle East and stuff like that. It's like, oh, you mean they're running from the religion of peace? Yeah. It's like they you need to make up your mind about what it is that's happening here. What was that? They had Jim Acosta out there, talking about
nothing happening here. It's all peaceful.
It's a wall, and I'm a martial arts instructor, man, and I'll tell anybody, I tell my students, it's like, look, when you're going to defend yourself, and if you actually have to put the person down, you don't go where their hands are, you go where their hands are not. It's the same thing with the border wall. They're not going to go where the wall is; they're going to go where the wall is not. So if my opponent's hands are up here, I'm not going to try to go for his face.
Take his knee out. Take the knee out.
Exactly. You go where the guard is not, So it's but liberals, they don't understand that. And they try to play up these things. I mean, they're the ones who manufacture the crisis. They're the ones who have done it.
Yeah. Well, we're about out of time. I just want to say this, Alfonso, because we've created Excluded here. As I tell people, you drop the E, the big X, so that we can have people like you on, so you can't be excluded. So perhaps off the air, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I tell my listeners all the time that not everybody can be a fighter. Not everybody can be a fighter, but everybody can be a supporter of people who are in the fight. And you, sir, are clearly in the fight. And so I would encourage my listeners to support people like Alfonso Rachel, obviously support our show as well. But fighters, if you have somebody who's willing to take shots, like I know you have, stand up and be a fighter, then the least we can ask of people is to be a supporter. So tell me real quickly as we end, how can people help you? What can they do? How can they access? What's the best way to help you in your fight, sir?
Thank you so much. If they want to seek me out, I'm at bronzeserpentmedia.com. All my social media contacts is there. You can find out information about what I'm doing to promote conservative values in different forms of media, whether it be music, whether it be teleplays, my commentary, the Zoloft, my Bible study, the Zopium Den, my book, if I may.
Absolutely, please.
A Solid Right Cross. It might be back. Hopefully that can get flipped around.
We'll put it up.
All right. A Solid Right Cross is basically my Christian conservative manifesto. and talks about this, why is it so hard to get through to a liberal, and understanding that language barrier that we're having between them and what they can understand, and helping the conservatives to understand how we could also promote these things in the culture better. Because we're scratching our heads saying, why aren't you understanding reason? I'm speaking plain English to you and you're not seeming to get it. Well, this book kind of covers why we're having difficulty with that.
Well, I really appreciate it. I appreciate you giving your time to this most dangerous man in America, an old white dude. I call myself Captain Whitebread, that I'm trying to, a hero will arise, that kind of thing. But anyway, I hope you'll check out our show from time to time. Let's stay in touch, and I'd like to get back with you and see what you're doing from time to time. And I wish you nothing but the best. And I tell my listeners, you got a fighter right here, and Alfonso Rachel, support the man. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it straight from a true fighter in Alfonso Rachel. What a great guest. We certainly appreciate him being on the show, and I would encourage you to go to the various sites. We'll post some of that so you can follow Alfonso and help him, because, as I say, a fighter needs supporters. I hope you have a great weekend. Myself, I'm going to make fishing great again. I'm going fishing this weekend. But above all else, have a blessed day.